The coffee burned Russell Root's tongue, but he barely noticed. He stared at the text message on his phone for the third time that morning. Emma's asking for you again. Can you please just come to Mom's party tonight? For her sake? Courtney's messages always followed the same pattern. Guilt, manipulation, then silence when he didn't respond fast enough. Russell set his phone face down on the kitchen table and rubbed his eyes. The morning light cut through the window of his small apartment. The place he'd been calling home for the past 6 months since the trial separation that wasn't really about working things out at all. He was 34 years old, and his life had become a negotiation. Every conversation with his wife was a transaction. Every request to see his daughter required clearance through Courtney's mother, Phyllis Moran, the 72-year-old matriarch who'd been running her daughter's life, and by extension his, since the day he'd said "I do." Russell had met Courtney 8 years ago at a conference in Chicago. She was beautiful, sharp-witted, working in pharmaceutical sales. He was a forensic data analyst for a mid-sized insurance firm, the guy they called when the numbers didn't add up and someone was hiding something. They connected over hotel bar drinks and a shared disdain for corporate politics. She'd seemed different then, independent, strong. Then he'd met Phyllis. The Moran family had money, old money from Phyllis's late husband's commercial real estate empire. After Gerald Moran died of a heart attack 12 years ago, Phyllis had taken control of everything. The properties, the investments, the family. She'd moved Courtney and her younger brother Brett Moran into the family compound in Greenwich, Connecticut, a sprawling 8-bedroom estate where Phyllis held court like some twisted version of royalty. Russell had resisted moving there after the wedding. He and Courtney had their own place in Stamford for the first 2 years. Then Emma was born, and everything changed. Phyllis insisted they needed help with the baby. The compound had staff. It made sense financially. It was temporary. That was 5 years ago. The apartment where Russell now sat alone was in Norwalk, 30 minutes from the compound. Far enough that Courtney claimed it was too inconvenient for regular custody arrangements. Close enough that Russell felt like he was haunting his own life. His phone buzzed again. Another text. She needs your father. Please. Russell picked up his phone and typed, I'll be there at 7. He deleted it without sending. Instead, he stood, walked to his desk, and opened his laptop. The screen glowed to life, showing multiple windows, spreadsheets, document files, browser tabs. For 6 months, Russell had been doing what he did best, following the data. It started small. Courtney had opened 3 credit cards without telling him. Then he noticed cash withdrawals from their joint account, their nearly empty joint account, that didn't match any purchases he could track. When he'd asked about it, she'd gotten defensive, angry. Phyllis had called him paranoid and controlling. So he'd started digging deeper. The Moran Family Foundation, the charitable trust in Phyllis's name, the property management company that handled Gerald Moran's old buildings. Russell had access to public records, and he knew how to read them. More importantly, he knew what patterns looked like when someone was hiding something. Over the past 6 months, Russell had uncovered a web of financial irregularities that would make any forensic accountant salivate. Inflated property valuations, shell companies, rental income that disappeared into accounts he couldn't trace. The Moran Family Foundation claimed to donate millions to children's charities, but Russell couldn't find evidence of where that money actually went. He'd compiled everything into encrypted files, cross-referenced with source documents. Old habits died hard, but he hadn't known what to do with the information. Confronting Courtney was pointless. She'd run to Phyllis, and he'd be painted as the villain again. Going to authorities felt like nuclear war, and Emma would be caught in the blast. So he'd waited, documented, watched. His phone rang. Not a text this time, an actual call. Unknown number. Russell hesitated, then answered. Mr. Root, a young woman's voice, professional. Speaking. This is Jody Browning from Ridgemont Elementary. I'm calling about Emma. Russell's chest tightened. Is she okay? She's fine physically, but I wanted to touch base with you. We have Emma listed with both you and Mrs. Root as primary contacts, and I've tried reaching Mrs. Root several times this week without success. What's going on? There was a pause. Emma's been withdrawn lately. She's not engaging with other children during recess. Her teacher, Mrs. Santos, noticed she's been falling asleep in class. And yesterday, she told the school counselor she didn't want to go home. The words hit Russell like a punch. She said that. She didn't elaborate when asked. But combined with the other behaviors, we felt it was important to reach out. Is everything all right at home? I don't live at home right now, Russell said carefully. My wife and I are separated. Emma lives with her mother. I see. The professional tone had shifted slightly, more guarded now. Would it be possible for you to come in for a meeting? Perhaps tomorrow? I'll be there. What time? After Jody gave him the details and hung up, Russell sat motionless. Emma wasn't sleeping. Emma didn't want to go home. And Courtney hadn't mentioned any of this, hadn't even returned the school's calls. He'd been a coward. He'd been so focused on gathering evidence, on playing it safe, that he'd left his daughter in that house. With those people, Russell grabbed his keys. The drive to Greenwich felt longer than usual. Russell's hands gripped the steering wheel as he rehearsed conversations in his head. He tried calling Courtney 3 times. Straight to voicemail. Not unusual. She often silenced her phone when at the compound, claimed Phyllis thought it was rude to be distracted by devices during family time. It was 4 in the afternoon. The party wouldn't start until 7, but Russell couldn't wait. He needed to see Emma now. The Moore End compound sat on 12 acres at the end of a private drive, hidden behind stone walls and oak trees. Russell had the gate code. Phyllis hadn't thought to change it, probably because she didn't actually believe he'd be bold enough to use it anymore. He punched in the numbers. The iron gates swung open. The main house loomed ahead, all white columns and pristine landscaping. A catering truck was parked near the side entrance. Workers carried boxes inside. The party preparations were already underway. Russell parked near the front and walked to the door. He didn't knock. Technically, his name was still on the deed, even if Phyllis had convinced Courtney to move them into the house as an investment and family tradition. Inside, the house was chaos. Caterers in black uniforms moved through hallways. Someone was arranging flowers in the foyer. Classical music played from hidden speakers. Russell, a woman's voice, sharp with surprise. He turned. April McPherson, Phyllis's personal assistant, though enforcer was probably more accurate. She was 40-something, rail-thin, with the kind of severe expression that suggested she'd been born disapproving of everything. Where's Emma? Russell asked. You're not supposed to be here. Courtney said. Where's my daughter? April. April's mouth formed a thin line. Mrs. Moran is resting before the party. If you need to speak with Courtney. I'm not asking Courtney. I'm asking you. Where's Emma? Before April could answer, a child's laugh echoed from somewhere deeper in the house. Russell didn't wait. He moved past April, ignoring her protests, following the sound through the ornate living room and toward the back of the house. He found Emma in the kitchen with Vanessa Wiley, one of the household staff. The little girl was standing on a step stool, helping arrange canapes on a tray, her brown hair pulled into tight braids that looked uncomfortable. She wore a white dress that seemed too formal, too stiff, nothing like the colorful clothes Russell usually bought her. Daddy, Emma's face lit up. She scrambled down from the stool and ran to him. Russell scooped her up, and the weight of her in his arms made everything else fall away for a moment. She smelled like vanilla and soap. Hey, princess, what are you doing? Helping Miss Vanessa with Grandma's party. Emma's voice was bright, but there was something underneath it, a careful performance. I'm being really good. You're always good, Russell said. He looked at Vanessa over Emma's shoulder. The woman was in her 50s, had worked for the Morans for 20 years. Her expression was unreadable. Can I talk to my daughter alone? Vanessa nodded and left without a word. Russell set Emma down and crouched to her eye level. How are you really doing, sweetheart? I'm fine. The automatic response of a child who'd learned what adults wanted to hear. Emma, talk to me. Her eyes darted toward the doorway, checking if anyone was listening. Then, quieter. Grandma says I have to help at the party tonight. She says I'm old enough to contribute to the family. Contribute how? Serving drinks and taking empty plates. She says I need to learn responsibility. Emma's voice was small. Mommy says it's good for me too, that I'm too spoiled and need to understand how lucky I am. Russell felt something cold settle in his chest. Where's your mom now? Getting ready with Aunt Diane. They've been in the salon since lunch. Diane Finley, Phyllis's sister, just as toxic, just as entitled. The Moran women were having a spa day, while Emma was being trained as staff for a party of wealthy strangers. Do you like helping at the parties? Russell kept his voice gentle. Emma shrugged, but he saw the truth in her eyes. The exhaustion, the resignation. She was 7 years old, and she'd already learned how to make herself small. I love you, sweetheart, Russell said. You know that, right? I love you too, Daddy. She hugged him tight. Are you staying for the party? I don't think so. Oh, the disappointment in that single syllable broke something in him. But I'll see you soon. I promise. Emma nodded, trying to be brave. Russell kissed her forehead and stood. April had reappeared in the doorway, arms crossed. You should leave, April said, before Mrs. Moran wakes up. Russell looked at his daughter one more time, memorizing her face, then walked past April without another word. But he didn't leave the compound. Instead, he sat in his car in the circular driveway, engine off, and thought about what he'd just seen. Emma, being trained as a servant in her own grandmother's house. Courtney, complicit in all of it. And Phyllis, the puppet master pulling every string. Russell pulled out his phone and called his brother. Yeah. Brett Carver's voice was rough. He'd probably been at the gym. Brett had kept Russell's last name after their mother remarried. Said it was less confusing. I need a favor, Russell said. Tonight. Can you be on standby? What kind of favor? The kind where I might need a witness. Or a lawyer. Or both. Brett was silent for a moment. He was 2 years younger than Russell, a physical therapist who'd seen his share of family dysfunction in his own work. What's going on? I'm going to get my daughter out of here. Tonight. But I need to do it right. Russell, I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking if you'll back me up if this goes sideways. Another pause. Then, tell me when and where. After hanging up, Russell sat in the car for another 20 minutes, watching caterers come and go, watching the house prepare for Phyllis Moran's 73rd birthday celebration. Then he started his engine and drove away. He had 3 hours before the party. 3 hours to prepare. Russell returned to his apartment and opened his laptop. The files he'd been compiling for 6 months glowed on the screen. Spreadsheets, bank records, property documents, everything that proved Phyllis Moran was running a financial shell game with her foundation and her late husband's estate. But that wasn't enough. Financial crimes took time to prosecute, and Courtney would fight him for custody while it played out. He needed something more immediate, more damaging. He opened a new window and started pulling different files. Social media posts, photos, text messages he'd saved from Courtney's old phone, back when they'd shared cloud storage and she hadn't thought to hide things from him. There, in the digital detritus of the Moran family's life, Russell began to see a different pattern. Photos from last year's Christmas party. Emma in an elf costume, carrying a tray of champagne glasses, surrounded by adults who weren't watching where they walked. She looked exhausted. A text exchange between Courtney and Phyllis from 3 months ago. She needs to learn her place in this family. Your father would have demanded better. Another photo, this one from a summer gala. Emma in the background, 7 years old, wiping down tables while Courtney posed for pictures with donors to the Moran Foundation. Russell had seen these images before, but hadn't put them together. Hadn't wanted to see what they meant. Now, looking at them with clear eyes, he saw a pattern of child exploitation masquerading as family responsibility. He pulled up his email and started composing messages. The first went to Jody Browning at Ridgemont Elementary, documenting everything he'd observed today and attaching photos. The second went to his lawyer, Jay Lucas, a family attorney he consulted 2 months ago but hadn't hired yet. The third went to himself, a time-stamped record of everything. Then Russell pulled up the Connecticut Department of Children and Families website and started filling out a form. His phone buzzed. A text from Courtney. Where are you? You said you'd be here at 7. He checked the time. 6:47 p.m. Russell stood, grabbed his keys, and drove back to Greenwich. The compound was transformed. The circular driveway was packed with luxury cars, BMWs, Mercedes, a Bentley. String lights had been hung in the trees. The front door stood open, and Russell could hear music and conversation spilling out into the evening. He parked at the end of the drive and walked through the gates. Nobody stopped him. The catering staff was too busy, and the guests didn't know he wasn't supposed to be there. Inside, the house blazed with light and noise. Phyllis's birthday party was in full swing. Russell recognized some faces: wealthy donors, Connecticut society people, a few local politicians. Everyone dressed in cocktail attire, holding wine glasses, laughing too loud. He scanned the room for Courtney and found her near the fireplace, talking with Diane Finley and another woman Russell didn't recognize. Courtney wore a silver dress that probably cost more than Russell's monthly rent. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was perfect. She looked like she belonged in this world. Then Russell saw Emma. She was outside, visible through the French doors that opened onto the stone patio and backyard. While 30-some guests mingled inside, Emma was alone on the patio, wearing the same white dress from earlier, but now it was dirty, stained with something red near the hem. She carried a tray of empty champagne glasses, too large for her small hands, carefully walking between clusters of guests who'd stepped outside to smoke or talk in private. Nobody was watching her. Nobody seemed to notice as she stumbled slightly under the weight of the tray, or how her face was flushed with exhaustion, or how she'd clearly been crying earlier. Russell could see the tear tracks even from inside the house. His daughter, 7 years old, being treated like unpaid help at her grandmother's vanity party. Russell moved through the crowd. Nobody stopped him. He opened the French doors and stepped outside. The evening was warm, humid with the promise of summer. Emma was at the far end of the patio, setting down the tray on a side table. She didn't see him approaching. Emma. She turned. Confusion, then relief, then fear flashed across her face. Daddy, you came. I came. Russell walked to her and gently took the tray from her hands. You shouldn't be doing this, sweetheart. But Grandma said. I don't care what Grandma said. Russell set the tray down and lifted Emma into his arms. She was lighter than she should be. How much weight had she lost? We're leaving. I can't. Mommy will be mad. Let me worry about Mommy. Russell carried his daughter through the patio, past the clusters of guests who finally started paying attention, and into the house. The music seemed too loud now. The laughter seemed cruel. He moved through the crowd toward the front door. Russell, Courtney's voice, sharp and shocked. What are you doing? He didn't stop, didn't answer, just kept walking with Emma in his arms. Russell, you can't just... Courtney was following him now, heels clicking on the marble floor. Other guests were turning to watch. The party's pleasant hum was fading into confused silence. Russell reached his car and opened the back door. He set Emma inside, buckled her seatbelt, and kissed her forehead. Stay here, princess. Lock the doors. Daddy, lock the doors. He closed the door and turned. Courtney had followed him outside, with Phyllis right behind her. The older woman's face was flushed with rage, her perfectly styled white hair seeming to bristle. You have no right, Phyllis started. Russell walked back to them slowly. Other guests had filed out of the house, drawn by the drama. This party was about to become memorable for all the wrong reasons. He stopped 3 feet from Phyllis Moran and looked her directly in the eyes. The fury in her gaze met the cold certainty in his. Russell spoke 5 words. Quiet, clear, final. I know what you've done. Phyllis went pale. Actually pale. The color drained from her face as if Russell had reached out and physically struck her. Courtney looked between them, confused. What are you? But Phyllis knew. Russell could see in her eyes. She knew exactly what he meant, and she knew what was coming. He held her gaze for another moment, then turned to Courtney. His wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, was staring at him with an expression he'd never seen before. Something between fear and desperation. Russell, please, Courtney said. Let's talk about this. We're done talking. You can't take her. We have an agreement. We have nothing. Russell's voice was steady. Calm. Check your phone in a few hours. You'll understand. Then he turned and walked to his car. Emma had locked the doors like he'd asked. He unlocked them remotely, slid into the driver's seat, and started the engine. In his rearview mirror, Russell saw Courtney standing in the driveway, illuminated by the lights from the house. As he put the car in drive, she dropped to her knees on the pavement her silver dress pooling around her. Phyllis stood behind her, one hand on her chest, looking like she'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Russell drove away and didn't look back. "Daddy, where are we going?" Emma asked from the back seat. She sounded scared but also relieved. "Somewhere safe," Russell said. "My apartment for tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." "Is Mommy angry?" "Probably. But this isn't about Mommy being angry. This is about you being safe and happy." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Can I have my stuffed rabbit?" "He's at the house. I'll get Bunny tomorrow. I promise." They drove in silence for a while. Russell's hands were steady on the wheel, but his mind was racing. He just kidnapped his own daughter. At least, that's how Phyllis and Courtney would frame it. He'd caused a scene at a party full of witnesses. He'd made accusations he couldn't take back. And he had 42 hours to make sure none of that mattered. He pulled into his apartment complex and carried a now-sleeping Emma upstairs. She barely stirred as he laid her on his bed and covered her with a blanket. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her chest rise and fall, making sure she was really here, really safe. Then Russell went to his desk and got to work. He had emails to send, documents to file, reports to submit. The Connecticut Department of Children and Families received his detailed complaint at 9:17 p.m., with photo evidence attached. His lawyer received a comprehensive divorce filing an emergency custody petition at 9:45 p.m., along with instructions to file first thing Monday morning. But that was just the beginning. Russell opened the encrypted files he'd been compiling for 6 months. The Moran Family Foundation, the shell companies, the falsified charitable donations, the property schemes. He'd found it all, documented it all, and now he was going to expose it all. He sent copies to the IRS, to the Connecticut Attorney General's office, to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, to 3 different journalists who specialized in nonprofit fraud. Each email carefully worded, each package of evidence meticulously organized. Phyllis Moran had built her empire on her husband's money and her own ruthlessness. She'd controlled Courtney's life, infected his marriage, and turned his daughter into a servant. She'd hidden financial crimes behind charitable giving and society connections. Russell was about to burn it all down. At 11:30 p.m., he sent one final email, this one to Edmund Pollard, an investigative reporter at the Hartford Courant who'd been covering nonprofit corruption for 15 years. Russell had researched him carefully. Pollard was thorough, ethical, and had successfully exposed 2 major fraud cases in the past decade. The email contained everything: financial records, property documents, photos of Emma being used as staff at family events, text messages showing Phyllis's control over Courtney, and a detailed narrative of how the Moran family had been running a fraudulent foundation while abusing a child under the guise of family values. Russell hit send and closed his laptop. In the bedroom, Emma stirred and called out softly. Russell went to her and sat on the edge of the bed. "You okay, sweetheart? I had a bad dream." Her voice was sleepy, confused. "You're safe now. I've got you." Emma reached for his hand. "Are you going to get in trouble?" "Maybe, but you're worth it." She fell back asleep, holding his hand. Russell stayed there until he was sure she wouldn't wake up, then returned to his desk. His phone sat face up, screen dark. He knew what was coming. The calls would start soon. The first call came at 6:47 a.m. Saturday morning. Russell was already awake, had been for hours. He'd spent the night alternating between watching Emma sleep and refreshing his email. The number was Courtney's. He didn't answer. The second call came 5 minutes later. "Phyllis." He let go to voicemail. By 8 a.m., there had been 12 calls. Courtney, Phyllis, April, Diane, Brett Moran, even people Russell didn't recognize. He ignored all of them. Emma woke up at 8:30 and seemed confused to find herself in his apartment. Russell made her pancakes, the chocolate chip kind she loved, and let her watch cartoons while he monitored his phone. At 10:15 a.m., a new email arrived from Jay Lucas, his lawyer. "Got your filing. This is aggressive, Russell. We need to talk ASAP. But given the evidence you've provided, I think we have a strong case. The emergency custody hearing is set for Monday morning." At 11 a.m., Edmund Pollard replied, "This is explosive. I need to verify sources, but if this is accurate, We're looking at a major story. Can we meet Monday? At 11:30 a.m., the Connecticut DCF sent an automated response confirming receipt of his complaint and assigning a caseworker. Russell watched the emails roll in, feeling the machinery of consequence beginning to turn. This was what he did. He found the hidden truth in numbers and patterns, then he exposed it. But this time, it wasn't an insurance fraud case. This was his life. His phone rang again. This time, it was his brother Brett. Russell answered. "Hey, what the hell did you do?" Brett sounded both awed and worried. "Courtney's calling me. Phyllis is calling me. They're losing their minds. Something about the police and lawyers. And I took Emma. I filed for emergency custody. And I exposed Phyllis's financial crimes to multiple agencies." Silence on the line. Then, Jesus Christ, Russell. She had Emma working as a servant at the party. A 7-year-old kid, serving drinks to drunk strangers in a dirty dress. And it wasn't the first time. I have photos from a dozen parties where they did the same thing. And the financial stuff? The Moran Foundation is a fraud. Phyllis has been inflating donations for tax purposes while funneling money through shell companies. I have 6 months of evidence. It's all documented. Another pause. "Do you need me to come over?" "Not yet, but soon. When this gets ugly." "Russell, it's already ugly." After hanging up, Russell made lunch for Emma, grilled cheese, her favorite. She ate quietly while he sat across from her, watching her careful movements, the way she cut her sandwich into perfect squares like someone had trained her to be precise even in this. "Daddy," Emma looked up. "Are we going back to Grandma's house?" "No, sweetheart. We're not. What about my toys? And my clothes?" "I'll get everything. I promise." "Is Mommy mad at me?" The question hit harder than Russell expected. "No, baby. Mommy's not mad at you. None of this is your fault." But Emma's expression said she didn't quite believe it. 7 years old, and she'd already learned to blame herself for the chaos adults created. Russell's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Root, this is April McPherson. Mrs. Moran would like to speak with you. She believes there's been a misunderstanding." He deleted it without responding. Another call, this time from Courtney's lawyer, someone named Miguel Paul. Russell didn't answer. By early afternoon, the call count had reached 34. Russell had stopped keeping track. Instead, he took Emma to the park down the street from his apartment. She played on the swings while he sat on a bench, phone in hand, waiting. At 4:37 p.m., the call he'd been expecting finally came. A Connecticut number he didn't recognize. Russell answered. "Hello, Mr. Root? This is Detective Raoul William with the Greenwich Police Department. I need to speak with you about your daughter. Is there a warrant for my arrest?" Pause. "No, sir. But I've received calls from your wife and your mother-in-law claiming you took your daughter without permission. I'm Emma's father. I have joint custody. I took my daughter from an unsafe situation. They're claiming kidnapping. They can claim whatever they want. I have documentation of child abuse and neglect. I filed an emergency custody petition yesterday, and I reported everything to DCF. If you want to arrest me, detective, you're welcome to try. But I'm not bringing my daughter back to that house." Another pause. Longer this time. "Where are you currently located?" Russell gave him the address of the park. "We'll be here for another hour if you want to send a unit. Stay there. I'm coming to talk to you in person." "I'll be here." Russell hung up and watched him on the swings. She was smiling, pushing herself higher, her hair flying behind her. When was the last time he'd seen her smile like that? Detective William arrived 30 minutes later. He was in his 40s, black, wearing plain clothes with a badge clipped to his belt. He approached the bench where Russell sat and extended his hand. "Mr. Root, detective." Russell shook his hand but didn't stand. "My daughter's right there on the swings. I'm not leaving her line of sight." "Understood." William sat down next to him, deliberately casual. "I've gotten several calls about you in the past 24 hours. Want to tell me your side?" Russell did. He explained the separation, the party, finding Emma being used as a servant. He explained the pattern of behavior documented in photos. He explained the school's concerns. He explained everything he'd sent to DCF. William listened without interrupting. When Russell finished, the detective was quiet for a moment. "You filed paperwork?" William finally asked. "Emergency custody, hearing Monday morning." My lawyer has everything. And the allegations about financial crimes? Separate issue. But yes, I provided evidence to the appropriate agencies. William nodded slowly. Mr. Root, I'm going to be straight with you. This is complicated. You're Emma's father, so technically you haven't kidnapped her. But your wife is claiming parental interference, and your mother-in-law has some influential friends making noise. I'm aware. That said, the photos you took at the party are concerning. And if the school has been trying to reach your wife about behavioral issues. William trailed off. Look, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that if DCF finds credible evidence of neglect or abuse, it's going to change the custody situation regardless of what your mother-in-law's friends want. That's what I'm counting on. The Moran family is claiming you've made false accusations to retaliate for the separation. The evidence speaks for itself. William stood. I'm going to write a report. I'll note that Emma appears healthy and happy, that you're cooperative, and that there's an active DCF investigation. That should buy you until Monday's hearing. But Mr. Root, you're playing with fire. The Morans have money and connections. I know what they have, and I know what they are. After William left, Russell took Emma for ice cream. They sat in the small shop near his apartment, and for the first time in months, his daughter seemed like a kid instead of a miniature adult trained to serve and please. Daddy, Emma licked chocolate ice cream from her cone. Can I ask you something? Anything, sweetheart. Are you and Mommy going to get divorced? There it was. The question he'd been avoiding. Probably yes. But that doesn't change how much we both love you. We'll have to go back to Grandma's house. Not if I can help it. Good. Emma was quiet for a moment. I don't like it there. Grandma yells a lot. And Mommy's always sad. Russell felt his throat tighten. I'm sorry I didn't take you away sooner. It's okay. You're here now. They finished their ice cream in comfortable silence. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Russell's phone buzzed constantly in his pocket, but he ignored it. By the time they returned to his apartment, the missed call counter had reached 42. Russell put Emma to bed in his room again. She needed the comfort of a real bed, and he'd be fine on the couch, and then finally checked his voicemail. Most were exactly what he expected. Courtney crying and angry by turns. Phyllis demanding he return Emma and threatening legal action. April's cold, corporate messages about resolving this situation professionally. But 3 messages stood out. The first was from Jay Lucas. Russell, you need to hear this. Courtney's lawyer just called me. They want to negotiate. Phyllis is offering a settlement. Full custody to you? No contest in exchange for you dropping whatever investigation you started. Call me. The second was from Edmund Pollard. Mr. Root, I've started preliminary verification on your information. I spoke with 3 sources at the AG's office, and they confirmed receiving your submission. This is real. I'd like to run the story Monday morning, but I need a statement from you first. The third was from a number Russell didn't recognize. When he played it, a woman's voice, young, scared, came through. Mr. Root, my name is Sherry Banks. I worked as a nanny for the Moran family 4 years ago. I saw your name in news alerts about the DCF investigation, and I need to talk to you. What they did to your daughter, they did to other children too. I have documentation. Please call me. Russell sat in the dark living room, phone in hand, listening to that message 3 times. Other children. He'd thought this was about Emma, about his daughter, about his family. But it was bigger than that. How much bigger? He was about to find out. Russell called Sherry Banks. They met Sunday morning at a coffee shop in Stamford, neutral territory. Russell brought Emma. He wasn't letting her out of his sight, and set her up with coloring books at a corner table while he talked to Sherry. She was 28, blonde, nervous. She kept glancing around as if expecting someone to stop her from talking. Thank you for meeting me, Sherry said. Almost didn't call, but I saw the DCF report in the system. I have a friend who works there, and I knew I had to. You said other children. What did you mean? Sherry pulled out her phone and opened a folder of photos. I worked for the Morans from 2020 to 2021. I was hired to take care of Emma and also to help at their events. Phyllis hosts a lot of fundraisers, parties, charitable functions. I know. What you might not know is that she uses children from the Foundation's scholarship program as staff at these events. She calls it giving them opportunities to network with successful people, But really, she's using them as free labor. Sherry showed him photo after photo. Children aged 8 to 12, dressed in matching uniforms, serving food, cleaning tables, standing in the background of fancy parties, looking exhausted. Where are these kids from? Russell asked, his voice tight. Foster care, mostly. The Moran Foundation has a program that's supposed to provide housing and education for at-risk youth. In practice, Phyllis brings them to the compound, makes them work at events, and funnels the grant money elsewhere. I tried to report it when I worked there, but nobody listened. Phyllis has connections everywhere. Do you have documentation? I kept copies of schedules, emails, photos. Everything. Sherry leaned forward. I left because I couldn't stand watching it anymore. But I was scared to do anything official because Phyllis threatened me. She said if I ever spoke about what happened at the compound, she'd make sure I never worked with children again. Russell felt cold rage settle in his chest. How many kids? At least 15 over the year I was there. Maybe more before I started. Are any of them still at the compound? I don't know. The program supposedly places them in group homes after a year, but I never saw where they went. Russell took out his own phone and pulled up the files he'd compiled on the Moran Foundation. He showed Sherry the financial records, the inflated donation claims, the shell companies. I've been investigating the money trail, Russell said. The foundation claims to spend millions on youth programs, but I couldn't find evidence of where that money actually goes. Now I know why. What are you going to do? Sherry asked. I'm going to destroy them. Sherry looked scared but relieved. I'll testify to whatever you need. I have a statement prepared. I need to know this will actually matter. That Phyllis won't just buy her way out of it. She's done buying her way out of things. They talked for another hour. Sherry provided Russell with copies of everything she had. Emails from Phyllis detailing party staffing, photos of children working events, schedules showing educational activities that were actually catering shifts. It was a complete paper trail of exploitation. After Sherry left, Russell sat with Emma while she finished coloring. His phone had been buzzing all morning. More calls, more messages. The count was probably over 60 by now. At 2 p.m., he finally listened to the most recent voicemail. It was from Courtney, and she sounded destroyed. Russell, please call me back. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But she's not doing well. She's been in her room all day. The police came yesterday, and some agents from the IRS this morning. I don't understand what's happening. Please, just tell me what you want. We can fix this. We can work something out. Just, please call me. Russell deleted it. Another message, this one from Miguel Paul, Courtney's lawyer. Mr. Root, this is Miguel Paul. I strongly advise you to return your daughter immediately and schedule mediation before tomorrow's hearing. My client is prepared to pursue full legal action if necessary, including charges of parental interference and defamation. This situation can still be resolved professionally. Russell deleted that too. The final message was from his own lawyer, Jay Lucas. Russell, we need to talk before tomorrow's hearing. The Morans are bringing serious firepower. They've hired Carlos Shepard from Barnes & Whitman. He's one of the best family attorneys in the state, and he plays dirty. They're going to argue you're mentally unstable, that you've fabricated evidence, that you're using Emma as a pawn in a vendetta. We need to be prepared for an ugly fight. Call me tonight. Russell checked the time. 2:47 p.m. He had approximately 42 hours since walking out of that party. In that time, he'd sent evidence to 6 different agencies, exposed the Moran Foundation to investigative reporters, filed for emergency custody, and found documentation of child exploitation beyond just his daughter. The machinery of consequence was fully in motion now. There was no stopping it. At 4 p.m., Russell's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. Against his better judgment, he answered. Hello. Mr. Root, this is Phyllis Moran. Her voice was cold, controlled, nothing like the panicked woman from the party. We need to talk. We have nothing to discuss. I'm offering you a deal. Full custody of Emma, generous child support, and a substantial settlement if you withdraw your accusations and drop whatever investigation you've started. No, you don't understand what you're up against. I have lawyers, resources, connections. You have fraud charges, an IRS investigation, and a DCF case. What you don't have anymore is control over my daughter. I can make this very difficult for you. You already did. For years. Now it's my turn. Russell hung up. Emma looked up from her coloring. Was that Grandma? Yes. She sounded angry. She usually is. Are you scared, Daddy? Russell knelt down next to his daughter and took her small hand in his. No, sweetheart. I'm not scared anymore. That night, Russell couldn't sleep. He lay on the couch in his small apartment, listening to Emma breathe in the bedroom, and thought about everything that was coming. The hearing tomorrow. The investigations. The media coverage once Edmund Pollard ran his story. The Morans would fight back. They'd throw money at expensive lawyers, call in favors from their society friends, try to paint Russell as an unstable father having a breakdown. But Russell had something they didn't. The truth meticulously documented and impossible to deny. At 11 p.m., he received a text from an unknown number. This is Sherry Banks. I just got a call from Phyllis Moran. She offered me $50,000 to recant my statement and say I made everything up. I told her to go to hell. But I thought you should know she's trying to buy witnesses. Russell texted back, stay safe. And thank you. Another text, this one from Brett. Mom called me. She's worried about you. Call her. Russell's mother, Patricia Root, lived in Florida now. They talked every few weeks, but he hadn't told her about any of this yet. He'd call her after the hearing, when he had something definitive to report. At midnight exactly, Russell's phone buzzed with what he assumed would be another call from the Morans. But when he looked at the screen, it was Edmund Pollard. Mr. Pollard, Russell answered. Kind of late for a journalist. I'm on deadline. My editor wants to run the story tomorrow morning, ahead of your custody hearing. It'll be on the website at 6 a.m., print edition by afternoon. I wanted to give you a heads up and get a final statement. What's the headline? Moran Foundation under federal investigation for fraud and child exploitation. We verified everything you sent us. The IRS confirmed the investigation. The AG's office confirmed receiving evidence. DCF is investigating Emma's case and has opened inquiries into the foster youth program. This is going to be major news. Russell was quiet for a moment, processing. My statement is this. I'm a father who protected his daughter from abuse. Everything else is just documentation. That works. Mr. Root, one more thing. I tried to reach Mrs. Moran and Mrs. Root for comment. Mrs. Moran's lawyer said no comment, but Mrs. Root wanted me to pass along a message to you. What message? She said, I'm sorry, and I love Emma. That's all. Russell closed his eyes. Too little, too late, from a woman who'd stood by and watched her mother abuse their daughter. Is that in the article? Should it be? Print exactly what she said. The public can decide what it means. After hanging up, Russell walked to the bedroom and looked in on Emma one more time. She was asleep, curled around her pillow. Russell had managed to retrieve Bunny from the compound that afternoon with a police escort. One more humiliation for the Morans. Tomorrow, everything would change. The article would run. The hearing would happen. The world would know what Phyllis Moran had done. But tonight, Emma was safe. That was all that mattered. Russell returned to the couch, set his phone on silent, and finally fell asleep. Monday morning arrived with the sharp ring of his alarm at 5:30 a.m. Russell got up, made coffee, and opened his laptop. At 6:02 a.m., Edmund Pollard's article went live on the Hartford Courant website. The headline was even more damning than Pollard had described. Connecticut Socialites Charity under federal investigation. Child exploitation alleged. Russell read the article twice. It was thorough, detailed, and devastating. Pollard had interviewed Sherry Banks, included statements from unnamed DCF sources, and had somehow obtained comments from two other former employees who corroborated the exploitation claims. The financial fraud was laid out with precision, complete with charts showing the discrepancies in the foundation's reported donations. There was a photo of Phyllis at a gala, smiling in diamonds, with a caption noting she was unavailable for comment. And there, near the end of the article, was Courtney's message. Mrs. Courtney Root, daughter of Mrs. Moran and wife of Russell Root, said through her attorney, I'm sorry, and I love Emma. No denial, no defense of her mother, just a tiny, insufficient apology. Russell's phone exploded with notifications. News alerts, social media shares, text messages from people he hadn't heard from in years. The story was spreading fast. At 7 a.m., Emma woke up. Russell made her breakfast while she chattered about a dream she'd had about unicorns. She had no idea that in 3 hours, her family's dysfunction would be argued in front of a judge. At 8:30 a.m., Russell dressed in his only suit, navy blue, slightly worn, and helped Emma into the dress his mother had mailed overnight. Patricia had called him after seeing the news and immediately asked what she could do to help. "Bring my granddaughter something beautiful to wear to court," Russell had said. "She needs to look like the child she is, not a servant." The dress was light blue with small flowers embroidered on the collar. Emma loved it immediately. They arrived at the courthouse in Stamford at 9:15 a.m. Jay Lucas was waiting outside, looking stressed but determined. "The Quran article dropped this morning," Jay said without preamble. "It's everywhere. That changes things significantly. Carlos Shepard is going to try to paint this as a media circus that you orchestrated, but Judge Patricia Finley is fair. She won't be swayed by grandstanding." Wait, Judge Patricia Finley. Russell had forgotten she'd been appointed to family court. "She goes by her married name professionally," Jay said, reading Russell's expression. "Trust me, it's a good draw. She's tough, but reasonable." Inside, the courthouse was buzzing with more activity than usual. Russell spotted news crews in the lobby. Word of the hearing had leaked, probably thanks to the Moran's lawyers trying to control the narrative. In the courtroom, Courtney sat at the defendant's table with Carlos Shepard, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit who looked exactly like the type of attorney who billed $800 an hour. Next to Courtney was Phyllis, looking 20 years older than she had on Friday night. April McPherson sat behind them, along with Diane Finley and Brett Moran. The Moran family had shown up in force. Russell took his seat at the plaintiff's table with Jay Lucas. Emma sat between them, small and nervous. Russell held her hand. At 9:30 a.m. exactly, Judge Patricia Finley entered the courtroom. She was in her late 50s, black, with an expression that suggested she'd seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The hearing began. Carlos Shepard started with a motion to dismiss, arguing that Russell had orchestrated a malicious media campaign to prejudice the case. Judge Finley denied it immediately. "The article in the Hartford Courant is based on independent reporting," she said dryly. "If you're suggesting Mr. Root somehow controls the IRS and DCF investigations mentioned in that article, you're welcome to present evidence. Otherwise, we're proceeding with the emergency custody petition." Shepard changed tactics, arguing that Russell had taken Emma without proper notice and was using her as a pawn in a vendetta against his estranged wife's family. Jay Lucas stood and presented the photographs. Emma serving drinks at parties, looking exhausted and dirty. He presented the school's concerns. He presented Sherry Banks's statement about the foundation's exploitation of foster children. "Your Honor," Jay said, "this isn't about a vendetta. This is about a father who found his 7-year-old daughter being treated as household staff and removed her from an abusive situation. Everything Mr. Root has documented is a matter of public record and ongoing investigation." Judge Finley reviewed the materials in silence. Then she turned to Courtney. "Mrs. Root, did you know your daughter was working at these parties?" Courtney stood, hands shaking. "Your Honor, I thought it was just helping out. Teaching responsibility. My mother said." "I didn't ask what your mother said. I asked if you knew your 7-year-old daughter was serving alcohol to adults at social events instead of playing with other children." "Yes, Your Honor. But I didn't think. That's evident." Judge Finley's tone was sharp. "Where's Mrs. Moran? She's listed as a party with interest in this case." Carlos Shepard stood. "Mrs. Moran is present in the courtroom, Your Honor. I'd like to hear from her directly." Phyllis stood slowly. Even from across the room, Russell could see she was barely holding it together. The woman who'd controlled everything with an iron fist was crumbling. "Mrs. Moran," Judge Finley said, "the court has received documentation that your foundation is under investigation by multiple federal and state agencies. The allegations include financial fraud and child exploitation. Do you have anything to say about these allegations in relation to your granddaughter's treatment?" "Your Honor," Those allegations are, Phyllis's voice cracked. They're exaggerated. My foundation has helped hundreds of children over the years. I'm not asking about the foundation's general activities. I'm asking specifically about Emma Root. Was she used as staff at your events? Silence. Phyllis couldn't speak. Finally, she whispered. She was family. We were teaching her values. By having her serve drinks to strangers while wearing dirty clothes and missing sleep? Judge Finley's voice was ice. Mrs. Moran, sit down. Phyllis collapsed back into her chair. The hearing continued for another hour. The DCF caseworker testified that their investigation had found evidence of neglect and inappropriate labor expectations for a minor. The school counselor testified about Emma's behavioral changes and her statement about not wanting to go home. Finally, Carlos Shepard called Courtney to testify. She walked to the stand looking like a ghost. Her expensive clothes couldn't hide how much weight she'd lost, how exhausted she looked. When she was sworn in, her hand trembled. Mrs. Root, Shepard said gently, "You love your daughter, correct?" "Of course I do." Courtney's voice broke. "And you never intended for her to be harmed or mistreated?" "Never. Your mother was trying to teach Emma responsibility to prepare her for her." Objection. J. Lucas stood, leading the witness. Sustained, Judge Finley said. "Mr. Shepard, get to the point." Shepard tried a different approach. "Mrs. Root, your husband has made serious allegations against your mother and, by extension, you. Do you believe these allegations are accurate?" Courtney looked at Russell. Their eyes met across the courtroom. For a moment, Russell saw the woman he'd married 8 years ago, the one who'd been funny and independent and full of life before Phyllis Moran had gotten her claws in. Courtney's voice was barely audible. "I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. My mother, she made me believe this was normal, that Emma needed to learn to contribute. But seeing the photos, hearing the school's report, tears were running down her face now. I failed my daughter. Russell was right to take her away." The courtroom was silent. Carlos Shepard looked like he'd been slapped. "Mrs. Root, what are you?" "I'm saying my husband is right." Courtney turned to Judge Finley. "Emma should be with her father. He's the only one who protected her. I wanted to have full custody." Chaos erupted. Phyllis stood and shouted something. April was trying to calm her down. Diane was crying. Brett Moran just sat there looking shocked. Judge Finley banged her gavel. "Order. Mrs. Moran, sit down or I'll have you removed." It took 5 minutes for the courtroom to settle. When it did, Judge Finley addressed everyone. "I've heard enough," she said. "Based on the evidence presented, the DCF investigation, and Mrs. Root's own testimony, I'm granting temporary full custody of Emma Root to Russell Root, effective immediately. Mrs. Root will have supervised visitation rights pending completion of family therapy and the DCF investigation. Mrs. Phyllis Moran will have no contact with the minor child until further order of this court." Phyllis made a sound like she'd been punched. "Furthermore," Judge Finley continued, "I'm referring this case to the prosecutor's office for potential criminal charges related to child labor law violations. This hearing is adjourned." Russell sat frozen for a moment, then looked down at Emma. She was staring up at him with wide eyes. "Daddy? Does that mean I stay with you?" "Yes, sweetheart. You stay with me." Emma threw her arms around his neck and started crying. Not sad tears, but relief. Russell held her tight while the courtroom emptied around them, while reporters shouted questions in the hallway, while his old life officially ended and his new one began. When he finally looked up, Courtney was standing nearby, her lawyer gone, her mother being escorted out by April and Diane. She looked small and broken. "Russell," Courtney said quietly, "can I talk to you? Please." Russell stood, still holding Emma. "Not here. Not now. I know I don't deserve it, but I do love her. I'm sorry. For everything." "You're sorry," Russell repeated. The words felt hollow. "You watched your mother turn our daughter into a servant, and you're sorry. She manipulated me. I know that's not an excuse, but you're right. It's not an excuse." Russell adjusted Emma in his arms. "The judge gave you supervised visitation. Use that time to become the mother Emma deserves. Until then, we have nothing to discuss." He walked past her without looking back. Outside the courthouse, News crews surrounded Russell. He made a brief statement. Emma deserved privacy. The court had ruled. Justice was being served, and then escaped to his car with Jay, Lucas running interference. That went better than expected, Jay said as they drove away. Courtney's testimony sealed it. I don't think even Shepard expected her to flip. She didn't flip, Russell said. She just finally told the truth. They drove back to Russell's apartment in silence. Emma fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from stress. Russell carried her inside and laid her on his bed, then collapsed on the couch. His phone was vibrating constantly. He ignored it for an hour, just sitting in the quiet apartment, processing everything. Finally, he checked the messages. 87 missed calls. Most were from reporters. Some were from old friends who'd seen the news. A few were from family members offering support. And one was from Edmund Pollard. Follow-up story running tomorrow. 3 more families have come forward about the Moran Foundation. This is bigger than we thought. Russell closed his eyes. He'd wanted to protect Emma. He'd exposed a monster in the process. At 6 p.m., there was a knock on his door. Russell checked the peephole and saw his brother Brett, holding bags of Chinese takeout. Figured you could use some food, Brett said when Russell opened the door. And maybe a friend. Thanks. Russell took the bags. Emma's asleep. How are you holding up? I don't know yet. They ate in silence for a while. Then Brett said, what you did, taking on Morans like that. It took guts. I'm proud of you, man. I should have done it sooner. You did it when you were ready. That's what matters. Russell's phone rang again. This time, it was his mother. Mom, he answered. Russell, baby, I saw the news. Are you and Emma okay? Patricia's voice was thick with emotion. We're fine. Better than fine. I have custody. Thank God. I'm flying up this weekend. Emma needs her grandmother, and you need some help. You don't have to. I'm already booked. Don't argue with your mother. After hanging up, Russell felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe life could be normal again. That Emma could just be a kid. That he could just be a dad. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media coverage, and rebuilding. The IRS investigation into the Moran Foundation expanded into a full audit. The Connecticut Attorney General filed civil charges for fraud and misappropriation of funds. DCF identified 17 children who'd been exploited through the foundation's scholarship program and placed them in legitimate foster care while investigating their abuse claims. Phyllis Moran was arrested on 14 counts, including charity fraud, tax evasion, and violation of child labor laws. The bail was set at $5 million. She made bail, but her reputation was destroyed. The society connections she'd cultivated for decades abandoned her almost overnight. Courtney moved out of the compound and into a small apartment in Norwalk. She attended every supervised visitation with Emma, showed up on time, and slowly, very slowly, began building a relationship with her daughter based on actually being a mother rather than Phyllis's puppet. Russell didn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But for Emma's sake, he was civil. Brett Moran, Courtney's younger brother, reached out to Russell privately. He'd always been the outcast of the Moran family, the one who questioned Phyllis's control. He testified against his mother in the criminal proceedings, providing details about the foundation's financial shell games he'd witnessed over the years. I should have spoken up sooner, Brett told Russell over coffee one afternoon. I saw what she was doing, but I was scared of her, just like Courtney was. You're speaking up now, Russell said. That counts for something. April McPherson, Phyllis's enforcer, was charged as an accessory to fraud. She took a plea deal and agreed to testify in exchange for reduced charges. The dominoes kept falling. Edmund Pollard's follow-up stories won him a nomination for investigative journalism. He wrote a comprehensive series on how wealthy families exploited charitable foundations, using the Moran case as the centerpiece. The series prompted federal legislation to strengthen oversight of family foundations. In Emma started therapy, started sleeping through the night, started being a kid again. She made friends at her new school. Russell had transferred her to a different district. She joined a soccer team. She laughed more. One evening, about a month after the custody hearing, Emma was sitting at Russell's small kitchen table doing homework while he cooked dinner. Daddy, she said suddenly. Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for taking me away from Grandma's house. Russell set down the spatula and knelt beside her chair. You never have to thank me for that. Protecting you is my job. It's what fathers do. What you did more than protect me. You made it stop. Emma's eyes were serious. Older than 7 years should allow. You made sure she couldn't hurt anyone else. How do you know about that? I heard people talking at school. Their parents saw the news. Emma was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you stopped her. She was mean. She was worse than mean, Russell said carefully. But she can't hurt you anymore. What about Mommy? What about her? Is she mean too? Russell considered how to answer. Mommy made mistakes. Big mistakes. But she's trying to do better now. And she loves you. Do you still love her? The question every child of divorce eventually asks. I love who she used to be. But sometimes people change, and you can't change them back. What matters is that both Mommy and I love you more than anything in the world. Emma nodded, processing. Then she went back to her homework like they'd just discussed the weather. 2 months after the party, Russell sat in a courtroom again, this time for Phyllis Moran's preliminary hearing. He didn't have to be there, but he wanted to see it through. Phyllis looked diminished. The expensive clothes couldn't hide how much she'd aged. Her lawyer, not Carlos Shepard anymore, he dropped her as a client, was arguing for reduced charges, claiming Phyllis had been misunderstood and overwhelmed by the complexities of managing a large foundation. The judge wasn't buying it. Mrs. Moran, the judge said, the evidence shows a systematic pattern of fraud spanning more than a decade. You exploited vulnerable children for personal financial gain while hiding behind charitable giving. The prosecution has documented 17 minor victims and approximately $8 million in misappropriated funds. The charges stand. The trial was set for 6 months out. Russell knew it would be brutal. Phyllis would fight with everything she had left. But the evidence was overwhelming, and her former allies were now witnesses for the prosecution. After the hearing, Russell drove to pick up Emma from his mother's house. Patricia had moved to Connecticut temporarily to help with childcare, while Russell navigated single parenthood and a new job. He'd left the insurance firm and was now doing consulting work on financial fraud cases, using his skills to help other victims of white-collar crime. Daddy, Emma ran to him when he arrived, covered in paint from the art project Patricia had set up. Having fun with Grandma. She's teaching me to paint. Look, Emma showed him a surprisingly good abstract piece with lots of purple and blue. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Patricia came to the door, smiling. She'd taken to grandmother duty like she'd been preparing for it her whole life. She's an artist. I'm telling you. She's good at everything, Russell said, ruffling Emma's hair. On the drive home, Emma chattered about her day, about school, about her upcoming soccer game. Normal kid things. The kind of things she should have always been allowed to talk about. When they got back to the apartment, Russell had moved to a bigger 2-bedroom place, big enough for Emma to have her own room. Emma ran to her space to put her painting on the wall. Russell's phone rang. It was Jay Lucas. Russell, I have news. The divorce is finalized. Courtney signed everything. You have full legal custody. She has visitation rights contingent on maintaining therapy, and there's a substantial child support arrangement that factors in the Moran estate situation. That was fast. Courtney didn't contest anything. Neither did Phyllis, surprisingly. I think they know fighting would just make things worse. After hanging up, Russell stood in his small apartment and looked around. It wasn't much, definitely not a Greenwich estate with staff and tennis courts, but it was theirs, his and Emma's. A place built on honesty instead of control. Love instead of manipulation. Emma came back out of her room. Daddy, can we have movie night? Absolutely. What do you want to watch? Something happy. With a happy ending. Russell pulled her into a hug. I think we could arrange that. They settled on the couch with popcorn and an animated movie about a princess who didn't need rescuing. Emma curled up against Russell's side, safe and content. Halfway through the movie, Russell's phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Root, this is Sherry Banks. I wanted you to know that because of your courage, I'm going back to school to become a social worker. I want to help kids the way you helped Emma. Thank you for showing us that standing up to powerful people is possible. Russell read it twice, then put his phone away and focused on his daughter, on the movie, on the simple joy of an ordinary evening that had once seemed impossible. He destroyed the Morans, exposed their crimes, protected his child, and in the process, he'd accidentally created a ripple effect that would help dozens of other vulnerable children. But none of that mattered as much as the little girl asleep against his shoulder, finally safe, finally happy, finally allowed to just be a kid. Russell Root had gone to a party, found his daughter being treated as a servant, and said 5 words that started a cascade of justice. "I know what you've done." Those words had toppled an empire. They'd exposed decades of abuse. It sent a message that money and connections couldn't protect you from the truth. And they'd saved a little girl who deserved better than the life she'd been forced to live. The movie ended with a happy song and bright colors. Emma stirred and looked up. "Is it over?" she mumbled, half asleep. "The movie? Yeah, but the good stuff? That's just getting started." Russell carried her to bed, tucked her in with Bunny, and kissed her forehead. As he turned off the light, Emma whispered, "Daddy, I'm glad you're my dad. I'm glad you're my daughter. Now sleep. We have soccer practice tomorrow." Russell closed the door and returned to the living room. His laptop sat on the coffee table, still showing news articles about the Moran case. The latest headline read, "Moran Foundation formally dissolved, assets seized for victim restitution." He closed the laptop. He'd done enough research, gathered enough evidence, fought enough battles. Now it was time to focus on the future instead of the past. Time to give Emma the childhood she deserved. Time to heal. Russell turned off the lights and stood by the window, looking out at the ordinary street below his ordinary apartment in his ordinary life that felt more extraordinary than any mansion ever had. Somewhere in Greenwich, Phyllis Moran was probably pacing her empty compound, surrounded by lawyers and knowing that her empire had crumbled because one man had refused to stay silent. Somewhere in Norwalk, Courtney was probably in her own small apartment, grappling with the realization that she'd almost lost everything that mattered by following her mother's toxic path. But here, in this moment, Russell Root was exactly where he needed to be. Home, with his daughter sleeping safely in the next room, and a future stretching ahead full of possibility instead of control, love instead of manipulation, truth instead of lies. He'd said 5 words. He'd walked away with his daughter, and he'd won. Not in the dramatic, explosive way of movies, but in the quiet, permanent way that mattered. By being there, by protecting her, by refusing to look away from abuse just because it wore expensive clothes and had powerful connections. The world kept spinning. Emma kept growing. Life kept moving forward. And Russell Root, formerly trapped in a marriage defined by a toxic matriarch's control, was finally genuinely free. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.